Hi everybody, my name is Jason.
I'm Caden. I'm Jaden.
And we are the Yahuwah and the Torah group, and we hope you guys are doing well. And this is another section that we are going to undertake, and this section might take me beyond my life, because this book is absolutely huge. So when we're looking at this book, we're talking in a PDF of small format here. It's over about 1,100 pages, 1,148. And so when we are talking about the complete works of Josephus, we're talking about a book that was written after our Messiah walked the lands. And there is a lot of controversy with this book. And it is something that I didn't understand until I started reading the book. And now I am several months into reading this book myself. And I think that it is something that I think everybody should read, and there should be some understanding to all of this. And before we get into this, gentlemen, do you guys have any idea who Josephus is? Like, just out of the gate, Jade?
Yeah.
Who is he?
Read part of last week.
Okay, so you know a little bit what it is.
Yeah.
Well, since you did read, that's cheating. Okay, do you, since you've never been on this...
I was here for the reading.
You were here for the reading as well. So I got nobody to discuss this with. So the person who is not in this chair over here, do you guys remember... Oh, there's nobody in the chair. I guess I don't remember. Okay, so here we are, guys. The book of Josephus is... Josephus was a... Well... Let's just read it, because the entire introduction talks all about what he is and what he isn't. So let's just get to this, and we will begin this, and we'll see how far we can get into this. So this is the complete works of Josephus. His name is Flavius Josephus, and the enlarged type edition is illustrated, thank goodness, translated by W.M. Wiston, forward by W.M.S. Lasor. And I will tell you, as a book editor myself, I've only found a couple of errors in this book, and so it is not a bad book. So this is what it looks like. And we'll just run this up. I don't know if so much as I'll read all these, because we will read these as we go through this book. And so what we're going to be into today is the introduction. And as we go through this book is essentially very close to what a recap of what Scripture says. But you get a lot of different things in here. And one of the things I would like to explain to folks is that Josephus was one of these Pharisees. He was part of the Sanhedrin. He was part of the group of people that were definitely the people that Messiah fought against. When he's talking about a lot of this stuff, you can see a lot of what we saw in the days of Messiah from this book. It's very, very interesting. And so we will begin reading this. And here is the introduction. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. Flavius Josephus lived AD 37 to C 100. So homeboy was, he basically was born about 4 or 5 years after Messiah had been gone. Actually, it was more than that, right? So it'd be more than that. We got 37 years after Messiah was gone. He was 63 years old. 63 years old. And he lives quite the life, as you will see. Okay, Flavius Josephus is the author of what has become, for Christianity, perhaps the most significant extra-biblical writings of the first century. And let me put again a reader's note that this book has been manhandled by a bunch of Christians. As you guys will see in this, there's a lot of notes that you can see that the Christians, when they have grabbed this, they're like, well, this guy means this or this guy means that. What's going to be fun reading through this book with all of us is I believe that we are astute enough in Scriptures to bring out any of this leaven and at least compare it and figure it out. But there is tremendous amount of historical things that I have found in here that are very good and things that we should know. So let's continue on. His works are the principal source for the history of the Jews from the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, BC 17 to 63, to the fall of Masada in AD 73. And therefore are of incomparable value for determining the setting of the late intertestamental, testamental, and New Testament times. Josephus, born the son of a priest, was named Joseph ben Matthias, Joseph son of Matthias, being of a priestly family and a descendant of the Hasmoneans. He was well educated and rose to a respected position in the Jewish community. After a short association with the Essenes and a somewhat longer period as a disciple of an ascetic hermit named Bonus, he decided at the age of 19 to join the Pharisees. When he was 26, AD 63, He traveled to Rome and successfully pleaded for the release of some fellow priests who had been sent there to be tried by Nero. As a result of the visit, he returned profoundly impressed by the power of the empire and strongly opposed the Jewish revolt against Rome in AD 66, being convinced of its ultimate futility and fearing the consequences for his nation. Now, I don't know if you guys just heard, but that is what you will probably hear a tremendous amount of time in this reading is these are my dogs. We have 9 pit bulls. They live freely. They hang out with us. They are unchained. They are unkennelled. They just live with us. So sometimes they get a little loud. So that is my apologies for this and probably the other 4,000 times that we hear this. Okay. Being unable to restrain the rebellion, he reluctantly joined it and assumed a command in Galilee, where he fortified a number of cities, stored up provisions, and trained his army in anticipation of the arrival of Vespasian and his forces. By the spring of AD 67, Josephus and the little that remained of his army had been forced to retreat to the fortified city of Jotapata, where he eventually surrendered. During his subsequent imprisonment, Josephus became directly acquainted with and gained the favor of Vespasian. All right, so Cade, you probably will not know. I'd be real impressed if you did know who Vespasian was, and I'll be impressed if Jade, if you remember, as we did our extracurricular readings, what book do we actually hear about this guy from? Vespasian. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You can say even if you have it
hold
wrong.
on.
Yeah, I'm asking. Do you know? Take a guess. Jade knows.
Rival of Vespasian and his forces. So he's a commander of some sort.
Yeah, he's not in the regular scriptures.
Yeah.
You hear of this dude, and he is a he's huge. Jade, will you please pet the dogs?
He's from Rome or Greece, probably.
I don't remember where he is at, but he is.
Vespasian's Roman, I think.
Yeah, he's huge.
He's
Like he's all the commander. So what book would you take a guess that this guy's out of?
Maccabees?
You got it. Maccabees. Yeah, he's mentioned in Maccabees. I can't remember which Maccabees it is, but that dude is all around it. Okay, so when Vespasian became emperor in AD 69, through rather extraordinary circumstances, Josephus was officially freed. He returned to Jerusalem with Titus, Vespasian's son and future emperor, where he served the Roman commander as interpreter and mediator. Faced with the inevitability of the Roman forces' ultimate victory, Josephus attempted to convince the Jews holding Jerusalem to surrender and thus save the city. He was, however, unsuccessful, and in AD 70, the city fell to the Romans and was demolished. After the destruction of Jerusalem, Josephus returned to Rome with Titus and settled there as a client of the emperor on an imperial pension, gaining the rights of a Roman citizen and adopting the emperor's family name, Flavius. He began his literary endeavors. Okay, so if you guys can help me with the dogs, I really appreciate it. They are just being very bad. Stop that. Sorry about that. That was a beating of the dog as well. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this part right here because let me pause this real quick. All right, now one thing that we should talk about is AD 70 because we have an entire religion of people that are out there that believe that they are waiting on a part in Matthew when Messiah was talking about when Jerusalem was overtaken, that when people are in the field, not to go back into the city, when people are on the roofs, get out of there, that kind of thing. The Christians have failed to read any kind of history because AD 70, Jerusalem was completely destroyed. Not only was it destroyed, but when they were surrounded, people ended up having to do cannibalism on their kids because they cut off all the food, they cut off all the stuff, and it was literally AD 70 that the entire city failed. And so let's continue on with that. And so that is one the Christians call what they think is Bible prophecy when they're talking all about this. Okay, his first work, The Wars of the Jews, was written to give a general history of the wars from the time of the Maccabees to the Great War with Rome, which resulted in the final demise of the nation of Israel. Josephus' eyewitness account of the last years of resistance, and particularly of the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, are most valuable to a proper understanding of those events. Josephus' other major work, and his longest, The Antiquities of the Jews, published some 20 years later, was written primarily for the benefit of the non-Jewish world. It is a history of the Jewish nation from the earliest times. He begins with an account of the biblical creation narrative to Josephus' own time and was intended to demonstrate that the Jews enjoyed an even greater antiquity than did the Greeks. The works draw heavily from the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Hebrew Scriptures, and extra-biblical traditions as well as the writings of Greek and Roman historians. His autobiography, The Life of Flavius Josephus, was published as an appendix to the Antiquities and was written primarily to defend himself and his war record against the unflattering portrayal given in the work of another Jewish historian, Justus of Tiberias. Against Apollyon is a short and eloquent apologetic for the Jewish faith in contrast with various aspects of Greek thought. It is difficult to overemphasize the contribution of Josephus to our understanding of the social, political, and religious milieu of the New Testament era. While it is clear that Josephus was not completely unbiased in his writing, as evident from his occasional apologetic tone, he is nevertheless very reliable as a historian and deserving of careful study by the serious reader. And I agree with that this is something that we should all understand, especially Bible people. We should take this and we should understand what the leaven is and understand what the history is. And it is a great combination of scriptures, extracurricular Apocrypha, and this book. I think it's gives us a very good account of everything. Okay, now about this new updated translation. The English translation upon which this edition is based first appeared in 1736. William Whiston, 1667 to 1752. The translator, that's really old. That dude almost made it almost 100 years. Yeah, much later than the other things. Okay, sorry, that is Leo. The translator was a rather diversified individual having noteworthy accomplishments in the areas of mathematics, philosophy, and theology. He is without a doubt the best known and widely read English translation of the works of Josephus. In the present edition, the entire text of Whiston's work, his translation of Josephus's writings, with his accompanying notes as well as his essays or dissertations in the appendix, have been retyped, set in modern, easy-to-read type. Apart from the updating of a few spellings in the conversion of Roman numerals into Arabic numerals, i.e. into modern numbers. The original work has been left unchanged, with one major exception. A new numbering system has been added to enhance the usefulness of this important work for the modern reader. And actually, that is a very important piece because, as you will see, things are numbered very oddly in this thing. So there's two different people's numberings is what you're going to see. With the appearance of Josephus' writings in the Loeb Classical Library Series, published by Harvard University Press, scholars begin to refer to passages in Josephus by citing the numbers used in the Greek text instead of the old numbering system used by Whiston. As a result, it became practically impossible for the average reader with Whiston's translation to locate the passage in Josephus to which a modern commentary or other reference work might refer. The present edition solves this problem. It not only gives the original Whiston numbering in each work, but also has included in parentheses throughout the text numbers corresponding to those used in the Greek text, making it an easy matter to locate any passage using the citation method. Now, normally I wouldn't sit here and read this part of a book to you guys, but because this is a long-term thing. This is going to be like 3 years. So when we're done with this, we'll probably see you at the end of 3 years or more if we ever make it through this. This book is absolutely huge. So we'll continue on. A great deal of change and advancement has been made in scholarship on Josephus and in the areas of biblical studies relating to his work since Whiston produced his notes and essays to accompany his translation. It is not all surprising that the modern reader will undoubtedly find some of his notes and essays archaic. And while it goes almost without saying that one would certainly be well advised to also consult more current works on any particular aspect of interpretation or controversy raised by Whiston, there is nonetheless a good deal of useful information to be gleaned from his efforts. Besides obtaining some valuable and helpful insights in their own right, the notes and essays provide a window for the serious reader interested in history of scholarship. Now, that begins taking us to the meat and potatoes of this whole reading. Here we begin the life of Flavius Josephus. Now, this is from Flavius himself, and so actually his name isn't even Flavius, his name is Josephus. So this is from Josephus himself. As you will see, that's not even his name. Flavius is some other name he just took on. So here we go.
Stole somebody's name.
Yeah, well, no, he got it by hanging out with these guys. The family from which I am derived is not an ignoble one, but hath descended all along from the priests, and all nobility among several people is of a different origin. So with us to be of this sacerdotal dignity is an indication of the splendor of a family. All right, Josephus. Now, I am not only sprung from a sacerdotal family in general, but from the first of the 24. Now this, I don't know if we should read this stuff, but I guess we probably will, because this is where the Christians jump in, and the Christians will put this stuff like all over. Like they will go, well, this is the laws. We know the laws aren't here anymore or something of sort. It doesn't say that in any of Josephus' stuff. But when we see all of this stuff, these are the translators' pieces. And some of the stuff I found fascinating. Some of it I find they're making excuses. So let's continue on. I will read what's in parentheses just so we get through this. We may hence correct the error of the Latin copy of the second book against Apion 8, for the Greek is there lost, which says there were only 4 tribes or courses of the priests instead of 24. Nor is this testimony to be disregarded, as if Josephus there contradicted what he had affirmed here, because even the account there given better agrees to 24 than to 4 courses, which he says that each of the courses contained about 5,000 men, which multiplied by only 4 will make not more than 20,000 priests, whereas the number 120,000 as multiplied by 24 seems much more probable, they being about 1/10 of the whole people even after captivity. Okay, and then it talks about Ezra, Nehemiah, first S, I think it's Ezra's. No, that's not, what is ESD? First ESD, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that'd be Ezra's.
No, and they have Ezra,
No,
first Ezra's?
Ezra's.
Okay, so that'd be like Ezra 3 and 4. Ezra, Nehemiah, and then Ezra's again. Nor will this common reading or notion of but 4 corners of priests agree with Josephus' own further assertion elsewhere, that David's partition of the priests into 24 courses had continued to that day. So what's funny here is these guys will interrupt you right in the middle of a sentence, and then you try to get back to it. So I'm going to go back a little further up to 2, and then we'll continue on after what they said. Now, I am not only sprung from a sacerdotal family in general, and I don't know what sacerdotal is.
Sacrilegious, but
I don't think it's
like the
sacrilegious.
Sadducees or something.
Maybe. But from the first of the 24 courses. And as among us, there is not only a considerable differences between one family of each course and another. I am of the chief family of the first course also. Nay, further, by my mother I am of royal blood, for the children of the Asmoneus, from when the family was derived, had both the office of the high priesthood and the dignity of a king, for a long time together. I will accordingly set down my progenitors in order. My grandfather's father was named Simon, with the addition of Celis. He lived in the same time with that son of Simon, the high priest, who first of all, the high priest was called Hyrcanus. You want to try that?
Hyrcanus?
Hyrcanus? Let's try that. Hyrcanus. This Simon Celis had 9 sons, one of whom was Matthias, called Flavius. He married the daughter of Jonathan, the high priest, which Jonathan was the first of the sons of Asamonicus, who was the high priest, and was the brother of Simon, the high priest also. This Matthias had a son called Matthias Curtus, and that in the first year of the government of Hyrcanus. I gotta get that one right. This dude's here a lot. Hyrcanus. His son's name was Joseph, born in the 9th year of the reign of Alexandra. His son Matthias was born in the 10th year of the reign of Archelaus, as I was born to Matthias in the first year of the reign of Caius Caesar. I have 3 sons. Hyrcanus, the eldest, was born in the 4th year of the reign of Vespasian, as was Justus, born in the 7th, and Agrippa in the 9th. Thus I have set down the genealogy of my family as I have found described. Now we have, again, the interpreter side, an eminent example of the care of the Jews about their genealogy, especially as to the priests. See it against Apion 1.7 in public records, and so bid adieu to those who calumniate me as of a lower original. Now, the thing about the Jews in general is that they are they try to get their bloodline all right. And up until the bloodline of the Messiah, it meant just about everything, because that is how we knew that the bloodline of our Messiah came out of King David. It came from Obed. It came from Ruth. It came from Judah, right? It came from Tamar, even back in the days, right? Jade, are you with me? Are you even following me here?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is why it is important that we have the historical context of where we are and where our Messiah came from. So what we just learned from this guy is his little bloodline, and then he also learned about his kids. Anything else? This stuff is kind of dry. You need to stick with it, because when we actually start getting into the actual scriptures, it is pretty good. Now, let's continue on. 2. Now, my father Matthias was not only eminent on account of his nobility, but had a higher commendation on account of his righteousness, and was in great reputation in Jerusalem, the greatest city we have. I was myself brought up with my brother, whose name was Matthias, for he was my own brother, by both father and mother. And I made mighty proficiency in the improvements of my learning, and appeared to have both a great memory and understanding. Okay, so this is Josephus describing himself when he was a kid, that he learned.
Good memory.
Yeah, he's real learned. Okay, moreover, when I was a child and about 14 years of age, I was commended by all for the love I had to learning. On which account, the high priests and principal men of the city came then frequently to me together in order to know my opinion about the accurate understanding of points of the law. And when I was about 16 years old, I had a mind to make trial of the several sects that were among us. These sects are three. The first is that of the Pharisees, the second that of the Sadducees, and the third of that of the Essenes, as we have frequently told you. For I thought that by this means I might choose the best if I were once acquainted with them all. So I contented myself with hard fare and underwent great difficulties and went through them all. Now let's talk about this. So this is a thing that most people do not understand. When you are in the Essenes or when you are in the Pharisaical side, you have taken on doctrines of men. Our Messiah came and completely tried to fight against the doctrines of men. One such doctrine of men that came about was with these three groups, one of these three groups that they had. Messiah was, they were in a place and they went and they started basically attacking the disciples of our Messiah. And they ask him as well. They say, why don't your disciples wash their hands when they eat? And this is one of these verses that you have 40,000 different Christian religions that now say that all food has been made clean because of this one particular topic. This topic was that the Pharisees and Sadducees and the Essenes, when you went into a temple or when you went to eat, you went and there was a fountain. It's like literally a fountain on the side of the wall, and you have to or do a special ceremony of you wash with one hand, you wash with the other, you spin cups around, you do all sorts of stuff, right? And that was their ceremony that they washed with before they ever ate. Now our Messiah came, and he and the disciples, they just went in, they just started pounding it down. And these guys are like, what in the world is going on? Every one of these religious groups of back in the day are exactly like the religious groups of today. They've all made their own rules. They've all made their own ways. And we have Josephus here, who not only wanted to become the best of the best, but he went and he entertained himself with all of these groups of religious things. Okay, so let's continue on if I can find my place. I think it's right at 10. I think we'll start with that. He loved learning, came into the city, let's see. High priests and principal men of the city came then frequently to me together in order to know my opinion about the accurate understanding of the points of the law. And when I was about 16 years old, I had to make trial of the several sects were among us. Okay, I've gone over this. Let's continue on.
I think you're on this 11th section.
Where am I on 11 right here?
I think so.
11. Okay, so on 11. So I contended myself with hard fare and underwent great difficulties and went through them all. Nor did I content myself with these trials only, but when I was informed that one whose name was Banus lived in the desert and used no other clothing than grew upon trees and had no other food than what grew on its own accord and bathed himself in cold water frequently, both by night and by day, in order to preserve his chastity, I imitated him in those things and continued with him 3 years. Now, guys, is there anything in Torah that says anything about this, like the clothes or anything?
No, this is his own personal choice here.
Yeah, and bathing in cold water day and night. Is that Torah based?
No, none of that is required of us. That is just what he did as his own personal walk.
Okay, so now here we are with their translators' notes.
Translator notes are longer than the book itself.
They are very long. When Josephus here says that from 16 to 19, or for 3 years, he made trial of the three Jewish sects. This is important stuff, guys. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. And yet says presently in all our copies that he stayed besides with one particular ascetic called Banus. And then it has a whole bunch of
symbols.
Yeah, I don't know what the symbols are.
Some of it's
kind of looks satanic.
There's like one thing of Hebrew in there, that one language mainly, but the rest of it's like...
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. It looks like gobbledygook. Okay, so they stayed with Banus, and this still, before he was 19, there is little room left for his trial of the three other sects. I suppose, therefore, that for Pero Atu, with him, the old reading might be gobbledygook with them, which is a very small emendation. and takes away the difficulty before us. Nor is Dr. Hudson's conjecture hinted at by Mr. Hall in his preference to the doctor's edition of Josephus at all improbable, that this Bannus, by his description, might well be a follower of John the Baptist, and that from him Josephus might easily imbibe such notions as afterwards prepared him to have a favorable opinion of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach himself, who is attested to by John the Baptist. Now, what's very extremely interesting on this part is, before we get into more of this, these guys, just like all the Jewish books, they've taken the name of our Creator out. This is why we ended up with a book with over 7,000 times that we have the name God instead of the name Yahuwah or Yahweh. And so here we have this same people. They've done the same thing to our Creator's Son, Yahushua. And so they reinserted Jesus Christ into this. I'm going to take Jesus Christ out and put Yahushua HaMashiach in when we are reading through this so that you guys know who this is. But they have completely taken the name of the Father and the Son out. Okay, continue on. So when I had accomplished my desires, I returned back to the city, being now 19 years old, and begun to conduct myself according to the rules of the sect of the Pharisees, which is of kin to the sect of the Stoics, as the Greeks call them. But when I was when I was in the 26th year of my age, it happened that I took a voyage to Rome, and this on the occasion which I shall not describe. At the time when Felix was procurator of Judea, there were certain priests of my acquaintance, and very excellent persons they were, whom on a small and trifling occasion he had put into bonds and sent to Rome to plead their cause before Caesar. These I was desirous to procure deliverance for, and that especially because I was informed that they were not unmindful of piety towards God, Yahuwah, even under afflictions, but supported themselves with figs and nuts. Okay, Translators notes. We may note here that religious men among the Jews, or at least those that were priests, were sometimes ascetics also, and like Daniel and his companions in Babylon, ate no flesh, but figs and nuts, etc. only. This was like the par atios, or austere diet of the Christian ascetics in Passion Week. I don't even know what Passion Week is. I think that's a Catholic thing, actually. Accordingly, I came to Rome, though it were through a great number of hazards by sea, for as our ship was drowned in the Adriatic Sea, we that were in it, being about 600 in number. It has been thought the number of Paul and his companions on shipboard in Acts 27:38, which are 276 in our copies, are too many. Whereas we find here that Josephus and companion, a very few years after the other, were about 600. So I'm not sure what point that is.
I don't know.
Okay, so continuing back up, that we were in it, being about 600 in number, swam for our lives all the night. When, upon the first appearance of the day, and upon our sight of a ship of Cyrene, I and some others, 80 in all, by Yahuwah's providence, prevented the rest and were taken up into the other ship. And when I had thus escaped and was come to Dicercia, which the Italians call Potcoli, I became acquainted with Alituris, an actor of plays and much loved by Nero, but a Jew by birth, and through his interest became known to Poppaea, Caesar's wife, and took care as soon as possible to entreat her to procure that priests might be set at liberty. And when, besides this favor, I had obtained many presents from Poppaea, I returned home again. Now, for all of you guys out there who are listening to this and you're like, who in the world is Poppaea? I don't know who this is. I've heard these names. We've heard all this stuff. That's the same stuff I was thinking, guys. It takes a lot to read this book. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of this will come to fruition, but we're having a historian give us his storyline. This is what a historian is writing about his own life and all of this stuff. So 4. And now I perceived innovations were already begun, and that there were a great many much elevated in hopes of a revolt from the Romans. I therefore endeavored to put a stop to these tumultuous persons, and persuaded them to change their minds, and laid before their eyes against whom it was that they were going to fight, and told them they were inferior to the Romans not only in martial skill, but also in good fortune, and desired them not rashly, and after the most foolish manner, to bring on the dangers of the most terrible mischiefs upon their country, upon their families, and upon themselves. And this I said with vehement exhortation, because I foresaw that the end of such a war would be most unfortunate to us. But I could not persuade them, for the madness of desperate men was quite too hard for me. Now, what we will find in these books and around this is that Josephus was a guy who was always trying to stop his country from being destroyed. And so as we're bouncing behind like Vespasian and Rome and all these other places and all these places we've heard of, these people right now, Israel is basically, they're surrounded by everybody. They are no longer a country. They're no longer their own place, but they're all literally in a place they're awaiting like war. And as we will see, there's a tremendous amount of wars that Josephus gets them out of. All right, continuing on. I was afraid, lest by inculcating these things so often, I should incur their hatred and their suspicions as if I were of their enemy's party, and should run into the danger of being seized by them and slain, since they were already possessed of Antonia, which was the citadel. So I retired into the inner court of the temple. Yet did I go out of the temple again after Manahem, and the principal of the band of robbers were put to death. And Manahem is like famous in this story, so you'll really get to know who Manahem is. Okay, and his merry band of robbers. Okay, when I abode among the high priests and the chief of the Pharisees, but no small fear seized upon us when we saw the people in arms, while we ourselves knew not what we should do, and were not able to restrain the seditious. However, as the danger was directly upon us, we pretended that we were of the same opinion with them, but only advised them to be quiet for the present and to let the enemy go away, still hoping that Gessius Florus would not be long ere he came, and that with great forces, and so put an end to the seditious proceedings. Is any one of you guys confused at this?
A little bit, yeah.
Does anybody have the understanding of what the world Josephus is even talking about?
I don't know who any of these people are. So.
Yeah, and so let us roll through his thing. Let's go through a few more of these on today's reading. We're in 30 minutes here. I want to keep these as short as possible. Okay, guys, it will kind of sort itself out as we go through it a little bit, but this is the hard part of the book that you get into. This is the first part, I think, is from what I've read, is the hardest part. The other stuff is stuff that we understand. Okay, 6. But upon his coming and fighting, he was beaten, and a great many of those that were with him fell. And this disgrace, which Gessius with Cestius received, became the calamity of our whole nation. For those that were fond of the war were so far elevated with this success that they had hopes of finally conquering the Romans. Of which war another occasion was ministered, which was this: those that dwelt in the neighboring cities of Syria seized upon such Jews as dwelt among us, with their wives and children, and slew them, when they had not the least occasion of complaint against them. For they did neither attempt any innovation or revolt from the Romans, nor had they given any marks of hatred or treacherous design towards the Syrian. But what was done by the inhabitants of Scythopolis was the most impious of most highly criminal of all. See Jewish War 2:18-3. For when the Jews, their enemies, came upon them from without, they forced the Jews that were among them to bear arms against their own countrymen, which is unlawful for us to do. The Jews might collect this unlawfulness of fighting against their brethren from that law of Moses. Thou shalt not stand against the blood of thy neighbor, and thou shalt avenge, nor bear any grudge. It says, thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of the people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, as well as from many places in the Pentateuch and prophets. See Antiquities 8.8.3. Okay, and when by their assistance they had joined battle with those who attacked them and had beaten them, after that victory, they forgot the assurances they had given those fellow citizens and confederates, and slew them all, being in number many 10,000s. Then they have 13,000 there. The like miseries were undergone by those Jews that were the inhabitants of Damascus, but we have given a more accurate account of these things in the books of the Jewish war. I only mention them now because I would demonstrate to my readers that Jews' wars with the Romans was not voluntary, but that, for the main, they were forced by necessity to enter into it. Okay, so right now he's just talked about two different wars,
right,
in two different paragraphs, right? And this is what's going to go on because the Jews fight. They fight. Everybody's fighting the Jews, and it's not just back in the days, but it is in the current days. Okay, 7. So when Gessius had been beaten, as we have said already, the principal men of Jerusalem, seeing that the robbers and innovators had arms in great plenty, and fearing lest they came, while they were unprovided with arms, should be in subjection to their enemies, which also came to be the case afterward. And being informed that all Galilee had not yet revolted from the Romans, but that some part of it was still quiet, they sent me and 2 others of the priests, who were men of excellent characters, Joazar and Judas, in order to persuade the ill men there to lay down their arms and to teach them this lesson, that it were better to have those arms reserved for the most courageous men that the nation had than to be kept there. For that it had been resolved, that those of our best men should always have their arms ready against futility, but still so, they should still wait to see what the Romans would do. Does anyone understand the world of the Jews back then in the day?
A lot of wars, and they're not all in the land.
Yeah, they're all over the place, and it's like whoever wants these guys to go do it, they'll go take over them. Like the last paragraph, they were talking about it. Like these guys didn't want to fight, but these guys were forced to pick up arms.
They're
right?
basically enslaved.
Yeah, they're all enslaved, and so this is why these and what Josephus is trying not to have happen is completely Israel destroyed, and so what you will see is that he is continually trying to do things, and he mucky mucks. He's one of those, what do you call a mucky mucker, where he like will hang out with the upper echelon of the people that you wouldn't normally do, because he knows like all the people all over the place. So as we're bouncing around trying to figure this out, let's continue on. 8. When I had therefore received these instructions, I came into Galilee and found the people of Sepphoris in no small agony about their country, by reason of the Galileans had resolved to plunder it on account of the friendship they had with the Romans. And because they had given their right hand and made a league with Cestius Gallus, the president of Syria. But I delivered them all out of the fear they were in, and persuaded the multitude to deal kindly with them, and permitted them to send to those that were their own hostages with Gesius to Dora, which is a city of Phoenicia, as often as they pleased, though I still found the inhabitants of Tiberias ready to take arms, and that on the occasion of the following. Okay, so yet another chapter about, or verse, a paragraph on him. You know, these guys were all like a little tiny divisions, were ready to go after Rome. But if they would do that, Rome would come and crush you. Rome was the iron hand of justice back then. You didn't mess with them, right? Okay, 9. There were 3 factions in the city. The first was composed of men of worth and gravity. Of these, Julius Capellus was the head. Now he, as well as all his companions, Herod the son of Maurus, and Herod the son of Gamaliel, and Compass the son of Compass, for as to Compass's brother Crispus, who had once been governor of the city under the great king. Now, this translator says that this Herod Agrippa, the father, was of old called a great king, as here appears by his coins still remaining, to which Haverkamp refers us. Okay, and so they're talking about them finding coins now that had this same guy that we're reading about's name on this.
Is it like the Herod?
It may be the Herod. There's a lot of celebrities that we're going to read about that show up in this book. Okay, Agrippa. He was beyond Jordan in his own possessions. All these persons before named gave their advice that the city should then continue in their allegiance to the Romans and to the king. But Pistis, who was guided by his son Justus, did not acquiesce in that resolution. Otherwise, he was himself naturally of a good and virtuous character. But the second faction was composed of the most ignoble persons and was determined for war. But as for Justus, the son of Pistis, who was the head of the third faction, although he pretended to be doubtful about going to war, yet was he really desirous of innovation, as supposing that he should gain power to himself by the change of affairs. He therefore came into the midst of them and endeavored to inform the multitude that the city of Tiberias had ever been a city of Galilee, and that in the days of Herod, the Tetrarch, who had built it, it had obtained the principal place, and that he had ordered that the city Sepphoris should be subordinate to the city Tiberias, that they had not lost this preeminence even under Agrippa their father, but had retained it until Felix was procurator of Judea. But he told them that now that they had been so unfortunate as to be made a present by Nero to Agrippa Jr., and that Sepphoris' treasury, and the Sepphoris' submission of itself to the Romans, that had become the capital city of Galilee, and that the royal treasury and the archives were now removed from them. When he had spoken these things and a great many more against King Agrippa, in order to provoke the people to revolt, he added that this was the time for them to take arms and join with the Galileans as their confederates, whom they might command, who would now willingly assist them out of the hatred they bear to the people of Sepphoris, because they preserved their fidelity to the Romans, and to gather a great number of forces in order to punish them. And as he said this, he exhorted the multitude to go to war, for his abilities lay in making harangues to the people, and in being too hard in his speeches for such as opposed him, though they advised what was more to their advantage, and this by his craftiness and his fallacies, for he was not skillful in the learning of the Greeks, and in dependence on the skill it was that he undertook to write a history of these affairs as aiming, by the way of harroging, I got to get that word right, to disguise the truth. But as to this man, and how ill were his character and conduct in life, and how he and his brother were, in great measure, the authors of our destruction, I shall give the reader an account of the progress of my narration. So when Justus had, by his persuasions, prevailed with the citizens of Tiberias to take arms, nay, and had forced a great many to do so against their wills, he went out and set the villages that belonged to Gadara and Hippos on fire, which villages were situated on the borders of Tiberias and of the region of Scythopolis. Scythopolis? Yeah, this is these huge old words. I'm old school. I haven't read these things. Okay, 10. And this was the state Tiberius was now in. But as for Gischala, its affairs were thus. When John, the son of Levi, saw some of the citizens much elevated upon the revolt from the Romans, he labored to restrain them, and entreated that they would keep their allegiance to them. But he could not gain his purpose, although he did his endeavors to the utmost. For the neighboring people of Gadara and Sogana, with the Tyrians, got together a great army, and fell upon Gischala, and took Gischala by force, and set it on fire, and when they had entirely demolished it, they returned home. Upon which John was so enraged that he armed all his men and joined battle with the people forementioned, and rebuilt Gischala after a manner better than before, and fortified it with walls for its future security. Now, I'm going to leave this at 11. We're going to stop on this, and let's discuss this real quick, Jade. What do you guys, Kate, boys, what do you guys think of this?
There's a lot of people we've never heard of before.
Are you guys completely lost?
Not completely lost.
Honestly,
I mean, I understand that people
Kate, are you lost? Kate's shaking his head.
I understand that people are going to war and that these are people during his times and he knows these people, but we've never heard of them before because we don't really get much after Yehoshua, right? We don't hear much of story. We hear a little bit of Paul's stuff, we hear a little bit of Peter, but we don't really know what happens after that.
Yeah, and so here we are. And guys, this is only 10 pages of 1,148. So as you can see, we'll probably be here 3 years. So if we make it here, if I make it alive, if you guys make it with me, it'll be a long 3 years of reading this. So guys, thank you very much for being a part of this reading and for reading these extracurricular books and all these things. This download is available at yahuwahandthetorah.net. It's a free download, free PDF. I think it's 5 megs if you guys want to read it or read along. There's a lot of stuff in here, and we will read it as a team and as a family, and we will discuss these points because the dryness of this desert, of the first of this, does leave us. And so there's a lot of it, though, and we got to get through his stuff before we ever get into the biblical stuff that we're all used to and where this actually becomes really amazing. So with that, guys, we thank you guys very much. We hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and we're out.
All right. Shalom.